What's the appeal in SCP? Throughout the course of human history, the unknown has always been a lurking thought in the back of our collective minds. There's something about the things we don't know that causes fear and intrigue in the human mind. The SCP universe offers us a peek behind the curtain of what it would be like if the unknown was superimposed onto our everyday life. Whether it be terrifying creatures that lurk in plain sight that you're unable to interact with, or things that were once familiar being distorted to the point of unrecognition. The SCP universe has intriguing, horrific, and awe-inspiring mysteries that are sure to leave anyone on the edge of their seats.
SCP stands for Secure, Contain, Protect, a secret organization committed to the protection of humanity from anomalous phenomena that occur. Basically anything abnormal from our everyday life. A special thanks to the Exploring series for lending me its voice in the intro. If you're curious about the world of SCP after this video, his channel is basically an encyclopedia of a wide array of different articles written on the series. And with that, I really hope that you enjoy. There always seems to be a sense of discomfort that we get from harmless things for seemingly no reason. While some of it can be more rational, like the fear of darkness, which is the fear of the unknown, or perhaps the stranger behind us, or the thought of a doll randomly springing to life bringing about terror, it's more of the irrational fear that I find fascinating, honestly. At an early age, I've gone from the fear of seeing the dark and actually ended up enjoying it. From seeing roller coasters as a machine that's built to kill me, to an exciting challenge to overcome. While I can't stand the sight of horror movies, mostly due to their attempt to try to scare me through some sort of shock factor, the world of the unknown sticks out far more as a unique prospect to me. The internet offers a wide array of mysterious content that pushes the boundaries of interesting and confusing. I frequently enjoy the creepypasta articles of off-kiltered video games that are allegedly haunted, or of the occasional lost media unsolved mysteries, being about shows that are familiar but have an episode that aired only once, and very few only seem to recall it. Stories that frame the familiar and twist it beyond recognition. Stories about SCP usually takes a familiar concept, something that could be recognized as harmless, and flip it to being a foreign, mystic phenomenon that just seems unrelatable somehow. Take SCP-3008 for example, a perfectly normal IKEA. Normally IKEAs are massive stores, typically known for their delicious meatballs. In such stores, it's not uncommon for you to feel lost with the towering aisles that stretch on as far as the eye can see. The writers of the SCP universe took this concept of feeling lost and a sense of awareness being stripped and turned it into a horrifying experience. SCP-3008 is an IKEA that, once you take more than a few steps away from the entrance, you're transported to an alternate dimension where the halls of the store go on forever. No matter how much you try and turn back to the entrance, the aisles of the store would simply stretch on ad infinitum. While the store itself would have everything anyone would ever need, like a typical supermarket, the sense of terror and loneliness of being trapped in a store forever would slowly sink in and make one go mad. There is a bit of light of hope, however, as the article of this seemingly impossible labyrinth does harbor other shoppers, each of them seemingly coming from alternate universes, where world leaders aren't the same ones that we would come to know in this reality, or concepts such as the International Space Station doesn't exist to them. But if this wasn't enough to disorient anyone coming into this strange world, things get a bit darker, quite literally. Enter the Nightstalkers. It's not their official name, but you gotta admit, that's a pretty cool name for them. These are tall, humanoid creatures lacking facial features that attempt to dismember anyone that's found in the stores after normal hours. The telling of which is by the store lights that are on or off. These creatures would go about normal business, restocking store shelves or doing normal things, but once you're caught by them, you would all but assure your immediate termination. And while it is pretty easy to attest this to some spooky creature just chasing you down, it's very clearly meant to represent the reality that you're still in a store. They act like normal during the daytime or light hours, but essentially act as security during the night. After all, you're still in a store while it's closed, playing off that classic fear of being lost in an environment that seems foreign to you, but all the while being in a place that you're not supposed to be in the first place. But SCP-3008 is just a small taste of what this universe is about. While the story of SCP is meant to be a secret organization designed to protect the populace from knowing about the horrible truths of this world, looking into these forums, page by page, you'll find yourself feeling as though you slipped into some top-secret archive, and finding out the dirty little secrets of the world being hidden from you. But this is the point of the website. It's the meta-narrative that truly gives rise to the terror going on behind the scenes. Sure, this organization known as SCP will prevent you from entering 3008, all the while protecting you from the knowledge of it. But what it really ends up doing behind the scenes, simply for the pursuit of knowledge, is where the true horrifying concept enters the fray. Say, have you ever heard of a DClass before? They're so dangerous that they're forced into cages. Some of them even being executed. They've stolen from you, killed your loved ones, and worst of all, there's still a lot of them out there, just not yet discovered. You talk to them every day, having no idea who they really are. Thankfully, the institution dedicated to securing, containing, and protecting us from danger uses those beings to test terrifying anomalies in the world, so they can better understand the unknown. That and keep you safe, but the only problem is, these D-Class are actually real. Not just in this fictional universe, but a part of our everyday life. They're criminals, innocent or guilty, being turned over from prisons and being used like pawns in a sick game, lambs to the slaughter, and a necessary evil. Or so we've been told, to test out the maniacal glitches in their reality. These people are fed to monstrous world-ending entities in order to preserve life on Earth, tasked with dangerous explorations into the unknown and untested territories, with nearly the promise of something going wrong, and probably worst of all, are treated like subhumans, tooled with the task of keeping humanity safe at all costs. Though usually an unwilling bunch, especially the bulk of them being convicts, the promise of freedom from their life sentences or the threat of torture for cooperation really shows how this organization functions. A by any means necessary type of operation going on over at SCP. One that the narrative of each article shows that at great lengths, they're not only able to keep their secrecy, but able to get the job done most of the time. All with the one singular goal of secure, contain, protect. You can essentially think of them as the Men in Black, the organization that runs the world in the shadows. The type that keep their eyes out for unusual happenstances around the world and have their presence underneath all the governments. They also just seem to happen to have all the power and resources to basically get anything they need to get done. I mean, this organization has access to amnestics capable of erasing the memories of anything. It's especially used on recent events, such as when a civilian comes into contact with things out of the ordinary, or to blank someone's mind and wipe them into a brand new person. Though this seems like a tyrannical government that runs things in the shadows, and it kinda is in this universe, this is in pretty good reason. The SCP universe has to deal with terrifying things, such as containing an immortal, nearly indestructible giant reptile that's hell-bent on destroying everything like SCP-682, the unkillable lizard, or perhaps a much more subtle yet far more deadly entity, one such that literally exists just as an idea, like SCP-3002. It's a simple memory of a Slovakian girl that transfers into memories of a person simply by sharing a memory of this person as a childhood friend. Once this happens, this causes the listener to have this memory embedded into their minds as well. And while this does start out as a simple investigation from a shadowy organization, it grows as an infiltration of this memory working its way up the chain of command. All the while, in reality, this was just meant to be an isolated happenstance. It was really just the remnants of this little girl that was tortured by this very foundation, one of which that was done to create a false memory and prevent the public at large from finding out the horrifying events that goes on behind the scenes. And it's stuff like this that makes me love this universe, because it's not just doom and gloom with scary stuff for your room. There's a legitimate sci-fi element to a lot of these things and makes them interesting stories and scenarios. SCP-1833, the Class of 76, is a lot like the one from before, but instead of it being a random memory, it's a yearbook that slowly implants itself into the memory's mind that this yearbook and its memories are the good times of being in the Class of 76. Almost as though it's your yearbook, slowly allowing yourself to have these false senses of nostalgia for your high school that you've never been to, or even probably born to attend to at that. I mean, ignoring the fact that this SCP will cause you to jump into a lake full of dead bodies, this kind of SCP has an interesting feel to it, and it gets creative in each entry. Because the simple book that makes you feel the power of nostalgia for a class that you've never attended isn't the only quarry of the Class of 76. There's sequences of whole marching bands happening due to listeners feeling nostalgic and wanting to jump in, or whole classrooms and reunions coming together from total strangers that all have the common thought of the Class of 76. It does still end with death, though. But there's fun stuff that doesn't end with death. Probably. Most of the time. Like me. I'm actually one of my favorite SCPs. I'm a toaster that can only be referred in first person when I'm talking about myself. Any attempts to talk about myself as though I'm not myself will result in me speaking in first person, referring to me as myself instead. The wacky nature that ensues from types of SCP like this takes it from being about a series of odd happenstances to an unfamiliar world, and makes things seem as though there's an entire world to explore with its own Easter eggs and consistent references to our world, as well as its own world to grow familiar to. I mean, there's even secret factions to get involved with in this world, like Marshall Carter and Dark, an organization dedicated to capturing anomalies and selling them off to the highest bidder. There's also the Serpent's Hand, which believes that all anomalies shouldn't be contained by the SCP Foundation. They really just do whatever they can to disrupt their mission to secure, contain, and protect. As well as also the ever-fun Dr. Wondertainment, which actually creates these odd anomalies in a way that would make them all fun and amusing, such as SCP-3301, a Jumanji-style board game that transforms the area around the players to an artificial environment reminiscent of that of an alternate biome, like a desert or a forest. A game that was created for fun and doesn't exactly have any lasting harm at the end of the day. The SCP boards is really just so much more than just a horror forum board, where everyone just tries to tell scary stories of a random wicked creature. It's outgrown that and formed an entire universe daring to tell stories of what it would be like to be in a world that's hidden from public view. Sure, there's still your typical race of humanity-ending monsters, aquatic leviathans that erase memories from those who venture too close, stone creations that would snap your neck if you look away from it, zombies. But there's so much more than enough stories to keep any growing mind interested, especially those looking into a new lens of how humanity would react to terrifying underlying threats, and the psychological damage that it does to those that it affected, and on top of that, what the affected could end up doing to those who trust them. Everything is simply interesting and so very creative for a forum dedicated to supernatural writings. A physiological look at how humanity treats the unknown, the inconceivable, and sometimes the indescribable. And I hope that what I've said here actually makes you feel interested in what, to me, makes this universe such an interesting thing to explore. Either way, I hope that at the very least that you can understand this bizarre form that I just can't get enough of. But I'm Blinkehyo, and I really appreciate you making it to the end. A special thanks to the Exploring series for topping off the video with that iconic voice of his. His channel covers a grand mass of SCP videos, and nearly all of them mentioned in the video have been covered by him. So check the eye icon if you want to check him out. Another grand, amazing, ultra-unique special thanks to my Patreons for this month, Lord Bus and Jamie, who just so happen to be the nicest people in the world. If you're interested in joining them, then you could get some updates as to what I'm up to. Or for even higher tiers, can be 100 words to read off for you if you like. But once again, thank you all for making it to the end. Just do those YouTuber things if you enjoyed the video, and have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.